We got Georgia at Bama this Saturday night. We're going to be there on the sideline, Bryant-Denny Stadium. I am monitoring closely the situation in the Gulf. I believe we'll have a hurricane by this time 2 days from now. I believe it will make landfall later this week. I believe it could impact this game. I've got my eyes on it, so you don't have to worry about it. This is going to be an environment that challenges for Environment of the Year. When these two teams play, it is like a one-game season. It's been incredible that I've been able to have a career covering college football, period, and to grow up in the South and to be able to do it, and for like my personal elevation to coincide with what those two teams have become, especially under Saban and Kirby and now DeBoer and Kirby, and being able to watch all those matchups. I've been at every one of those games except the one in the COVID year. I've been at every one of those games in person. I've seen them play in multiple national championships and SEC title games in person. So here's the question. As we start to get into this game week, we'll predict the game in full Tuesday night. Here's the multi-million-dollar question in the South. Everyone knows Kirby's 1-5 against that Crimson A since he's come to Georgia. The question is he 1-5 against Alabama, or is he 1-5 against Nick Saban? Because there has been a very popular school of thought for a long time amongst Georgia circles that if Saban stayed at Alabama, they believe they'd eventually catch and surpass Nick Saban. They believe that. They got supreme confidence in their program. But the second part of that is they knew Kirby's way younger than Nick Saban, so he's going to be around after Nick Saban retires. And all Georgia folks know that while they enjoyed the challenge of trying to catch and surpass the greatest of all time, they really relished in the idea of what they'd be capable of once he was gone. Because the assumption was there is no other Nick Saban. So whoever takes over at Alabama, even if they're good, it's not going to be Nick Saban. And if we're already going punch for punch with Saban in recruiting and on the field, these games are razor tight. So if we're already like that with him now, just by default, whoever they find to replace him, whether they nail it or whiff, we will elevate permanently to the top of this conference, and no one's touching us. So that sounded great. From Clayton to Valdosta, Augusta to Columbus, that's always sounded great. Is it real? That's the question that we don't get the final answer on this Saturday night, but we start to, because I can tell you from a psychological standpoint, it matters a whole lot more than a records-keeping standpoint. From a records-keeping standpoint, Georgia could go in there and lose 30-20. That'd still be among the best in the odds market to win the SEC, to win the playoff. So nothing would change on that front. Psychologically, if your first shot at Bama without Nick Saban, with Carson Beck coming back as your quarterback, by the way, ends up in a loss, that's tough. That's a tough pill to swallow. It is a gut check moment for Georgia. The way they looked the last time they played on the road against Kentucky, the way people have talked about that offensive line, the way folks, including myself, have talked about the fact that even when they get those defensive guys back, that's not vintage Georgia. And me knowing full well a bunch of those starters watch this show because I hear from them. Every time they overachieve in a game, I hear from them. So I love you guys. I don't think you're as good as the former versions of your team. So feel free to prove me wrong on that. But also, it's showtime for Alabama. This is the first shot in a major moment for Kalen DeBoer and his version of Alabama. Got a lot of the players Saban left him. It's not fully DeBoer's Alabama yet, but it's his team. And I think that game against Wisconsin, small sample size so far, is about as thorough a performance as they've given so far this year. They've got an emerging superstar at wide receiver in Ryan Williams. That offensive line looks now, when healthy, what a lot of us thought they'd look like to start last season. Running game's very good. Defense is fast. Defense is going to have a bowling ball thrown at them this Saturday night. And I'm very, very much looking forward to seeing that matchup. Just raw physicality. It's always been that in these games. Last year, Bama beat them in the SEC championship game because they owned them on the line of scrimmage. Specifically, that offensive line rounded into form and leaned on Georgia and ended up owning them in that battle, particularly, which decided the SEC championship game. Not a blowout. It never will be with these teams. But the margin was large enough where that decided it. So here's what happens when a team like Georgia ends up being second best physically. It is hellacious for the next however many months it is until you get another shot at that team. And they get their other shot at them this Saturday. Everything that's happened in that weight room, everything that's happened from a nutrition standpoint, everything that's happened in workouts on and off the field, every bit of extra film work, it's all geared towards knowing there's someone in Tuscaloosa who right now calls themselves the reigning champions of this conference. It's supposed to be ours. They got it. And now the schedule maker says we got to go in their building and take it from them. That's not really what happens this Saturday night on the stat sheet and in the rankings and standings. But psychologically, that's what it's about. Ohio State, Michigan, Texas, Oklahoma, Georgia, Alabama. Those three matchups, I've been on the field for all of them several times over the last few years, are unlike anything else this sport has to offer. It is the best show that college football could give you. I don't care what the playoff brings. I don't care what the national championship brings. There is no environment like premier Saturday night football in the Southeastern Conference, specifically when these two teams are on the field. So, you want to know why we revolve our coverage on this show around Saturdays in the fall? I will present this Saturday night in Tuscaloosa, Alabama as Exhibit A.